Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday between 2 and 3 p.m. I'm your host, Wayne Liu. And this being Wednesday, we have Vivek Jacob, Big V, friend of the program, probably number one friend of the program, actually, joining us to honestly talk a little bit more about OG and Anunoby trade talks. And then preview the NBA Finals a little bit. This might be the one episode, V, that we don't discuss our favorite sport. Just because
it's okay, man. We could use a break.
You're right. That's what I'm doing. Absolutely. So okay,
I know you could use it.
You say that, but I played yesterday. Busted up my toe in the process. It's all good. Anyway, V. So, yesterday, the trade report comes out from Jake Fisher, Bleacher Report, that OG may or may not, want to trade. To be honest, it kind of seemed like he doesn't want to trade, but teams are interested in trading for OG. Real interesting. So one of the teams, Portland, was obviously mentioned, as well as Utah. And when the Portland rumor was put out there, I think Dame Lillard liked a post about it. So, I don't know if that adds anything to it. A like could just be a like. But in any case, V, this kind of report got me thinking about who on the Raptors has the most trade value and sort of building backwards from there. Because I think a large part of, like, if you do want to move OG and stuff like that, it's really a discussion of his trade value. And, we saw, like, number 7 and, Josh Hart and this kind of stuff. Like, okay, that's kind of interesting to me. But I was thinking about, like, which guys on the team has the most trade value, which is kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. So I'll start with you on this one. Is there anyone on the Raptors who is untouchable? Like, you're not going to trade in any sort of context pretty much ever?
Scotty Barnes, that's the guy.
It's the only one?
I think if you looked at him, the only way maybe you would even get to a point where you pick up the phone is if it's about Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley or something like that, right? I think beyond that, Pascal is the closest. And so
Okay.
I think Pascal, when you look at, again, what the potential return could be, you're more than happy keeping him. Kind of tired of seeing his name attached to Rudy Gobert. Pascal is more valuable than that. So,
yeah.
So I think if I had to put 2 on the list, it'd be 2. If it's just 1, then it's Scotty first. But again, Scotty's also untradeable because at that rookie contract, the players that you would want for him are not going to be eligible, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so the Scotty Barnes thing, like, I think even earlier in the season when it was very clear, like, wow, the Raptors have, like, somebody who's probably going to go ahead and contend for Rookie of the Year, be in the All-Star conversation moving forward, like, just a rookie with a ton of potential. And I was even thinking about this, like, maybe back in December. It was like, is Scotty Barnes already, like, a top 10 trade asset in the league? Because I think when you're thinking about, like, not just, like, because a top 10 trade asset is not necessarily a top 10 players in the NBA, right? Like,
Right.
This is totally different. The reason why, part of the reason why Scotty is so valuable is because of the fact that he's already shown so much potential. You have him under contract for at least 3 more years, and then afterwards you get to sign him in restricted free agency, likely to a long-term deal after that. So you might be looking at another runway of 7 more years with a guy like this, right, who has star potential. So that's why I think when you're thinking about untouchable, I completely agree with you. I think the second category I kind of have is sort of like core pieces. Like, if you have these guys on your team, you have a direction, you have an identity. And if you move one of those guys, or if you move away from these players in this category of just like core pieces, you're essentially pivoting to a rebuild, or you really are going for like some sort of like Kawhi Leonard style, like we're going all in and we got to win the chip right now. And so
Right.
for me, this category of core pieces, I'm assuming you got Pascal in this one. I have Pascal in this one as well. Is there anyone else in this category that you would have?
In terms of the core, right now, obviously, everyone includes Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby in that as well. Um, but I think those are the ones where you start to say, okay, what is actually on the table? Um, So, yeah, I guess it depends on how you're defining the core because technically, when you're looking at how the Raptors want to build for the future, you would say that OG Anunoby is a bigger piece to that puzzle than Fred VanVleet.
Mm, okay, interesting. Well, what makes you say that though?
The length, the switchability, the 3-point shooting. Um, I think there's more to be gained there. I think his game is also more playoff proof, if that makes sense. I think
Mm,
with Fred
okay.
VanVleet, um, I think the size is an issue. I think, you know, he's had issues in the past with that going up against length. And obviously, this postseason injuries had a lot to do with it. But I think when you look at the future of this team, um, I think OG Anunoby fits that Vision 6'9" a bit better than the dude who's listed at 6 feet.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think that's all fair. That's all true. But I mean, in terms of like a diversity of skill sets and everything like that, I mean, the fact that Fred can shoot so well, and I saw some graphics that sort of came out about sort of like um, uh, 3-point shooting efficiency on catch and shoots,
Hmm.
charted against 3-point efficiency on pull up threes, right?
Yep.
And Fred is he's at like the top right quadrant. Like he's which is to say he is incredible at both of those
Yeah.
relative to the league wide. I mean, in terms of pull up 3-point shooting, in terms of the volume, in terms of the accuracy, it's like on par with a guy like Trey Young. And in terms of
Hmm.
catch and shoot threes, I think he like honestly before the injury, he was the most efficient catch and shoot 3-point shooter in the league this past season. And I think when you're thinking about like the style of players that you have around them, the one common weakness is like they just short on 3-point shooting, and that's where Fred really does come in. And I would definitely put Fred in this core group of like if you move Fred, for example, I actually don't think that. I think it would really signal a lot of things. Number one, like he's the leader of the team. Um,
Yep.
he is a lot of the identity of the team to me as well. I know the identity of the team is like everyone is 6'9" and playing the forwards, and obviously he's the one that sticks out. But when you're thinking about like this, almost the emotional identity of the team, like
Hmm.
all these players coming in who are low draft picks, who are undrafted, who look up to a guy who's won a championship, who's made an all-star in this league is I mean, Fred is very much a self-made man. Like there's nothing that was given to Fred. Um
Yeah.
and so when you're thinking about the identity of your team, I feel like he's too important to that. So I'm going to put him in the core for sure. And also just he is just very very good as a player and he is in his prime years. Um
Yeah. So one thing I will say is I don't want to confuse me putting, I'm just power ranking OG ahead of Fred VanVleet in that core.
okay.
So,
Okay, fair,
so
that's fair.
it's so this is not to say that to say that Fred VanVleet is below OG in the power rankings is not to say that Fred is not valuable.
Mm,
Obviously, everything that he brings to the table is immense for this team. Um,
it's a good
but
save.
I
I like
think
this.
in terms
It's
of the
that Thibaut
long term
Courtois
future,
level of save.
in terms of the long term future, if I had to power rank it, it would be Scotty 1,
Mhm.
Pascal 2, OG 3, and then Fred 4.
So what do you think you could if you were to shop Fred right now, whether you're left on this deal, bird rights as well on the deal, very affordable at the current moment. I think he's slightly underpaid by like 5 million. I guess that's not slightly when you're talking about 5 million, but yeah, what do you think you could get for Fred right now, hypothetically?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's not something I've given too much thought just because I like the idea of the Raptors just kicking the can down the road,
Me too. Yep.
um, and continuing to build with what they have. Because again, when I think of primes, when I think of the long term outlook of this team, Pascal and Fred, they might be 28, 29, but to me, they can keep going at a really high level till they're 33, 34. So
Hmm.
like 5 years is a really long time. So there's no need to sort of, push the panic button right now and just overreact because Scotty's 20. In terms of trade value, I mean, I think this is where you get into a little bit of the contract situation as well. At 4 years, 85, you look at deals that might be equivalent to that.
Hmm.
You probably won't get fair value
Yeah. No,
now.
that's a fair point. I like that. Yeah.
And And that's where I think it becomes more about role going forward with this team, where
Mhm.
you want to see the ball more in Scotty's hands. You want to see the ball more in Pascal's hands. And Fred, I think, would be happier and more effective playing off ball, and getting those catch and shoot opportunities, a bit more like what we saw in the championship season.
Mhm.
And, frankly, when I think about the long term future of this team, if Fred were ever comfortable with it, once he's, in maybe the down phase of his peak, I could see him transitioning to almost like a Manu Ginobili role, where he's coming off the bench and just stabilizing bench units and being himself at all times, but still, giving you a healthy, whatever it is, 27 to 30 minutes a game and impacting the game.
Interesting. Interesting. That would have to be a few years down the line for sure. More than a few years
Yeah.
actually, but yeah, I could see that. No, I really see Fred as a guy who's going to stay for a long time. And yeah, it's also tough. There's a lot of teams in the league that could really use a point guard. So it's hard to say. Like for example, if you were like to call the Knicks and be like, "Hey, we have this first time All Star point guard. What are you going to give me?" I think you could probably get anything out of them outside of like RJ Barrett. You know,
Mm,
so. But I don't want that to happen. I think again, like the reason I built this sort of like um, core group is the idea that if you move one of these pieces, you essentially are redesigning your whole team. And for me, I'm happy with the design of the team, so I don't want to do that. The next category I have is sort of like nice to have, appealing assets, and not to say they're assets in the sense that like you're about to move them or anything like that, but just like players who would hold a lot of value to both the Raptors and also to opposing teams looking to make a trade with the Raptors.
right.
Who do you have in this category?
Yeah. So I think Gary Trent Jr. has got to be there.
Yep.
Um, and then it gets tough because you've got Kem Birch on kind of a team friendly deal. You would probably think, if in terms of getting value back, you're probably putting the two together in a package. Um, and then, yeah, because you look beyond the four, you got to see what happens with Chris Boucher. You got to see what happens with that Young.
Yep.
Or else, they would probably figure into the equation. Um, so that's really it. I mean, Gary Trent Jr. is the guy that
What
you're
about
probably
Precious?
looking at.
What about Precious? Would he fit in this category? It's hard because his contract value is so low. Like, and his
That's the
number is
thing.
so low. So you have to like really attach him with somebody else to move. Not that you would move any of these pieces, but I think a lot of teams, if they were looking at the Raptors, they'd be like, wow, I would love to see Precious on my team, considering the leaps that he made this season.
Well, what I would say then is you would look at what the potential return is, um, and if you can get like a legitimate star out of Gary Trent Jr. plus Precious Achua,
Mm,
right?
yeah, right.
Uh, and then if you're making a significant upgrade there, then it's something that you would look at. I think Precious Achua, just his deal alone, it was the rookie contract was 4 years, 12 million. And
Yeah.
when you look at the upside
Yep.
of what he showed in the second half of the season, it is going to be very difficult to get fair value for that,
I agree.
which is a long way from what we thought in October, November, December.
Yeah, the Kyle Alexander trade seems fairly balanced now. I know at that time it was like underwhelming. People were like, "Wow, we didn't even get KZ Okpala or we didn't get Duncan Robinson." And it's like, yeah, maybe Masai knows what he's doing. It's okay, guys.
Maybe.
We took care of Kyle, and the Heat took care of us. It's all good. It was a win. It was a win-win. I think people are pretty happy with Precious, based on the moves that he made this season. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's the only thing. It's just like it is really hard to foresee a scenario where the Raptors would move Precious, just because he's still on his rookie deal, just because they just traded for him, just because Masai said, "Finally, you are mine now."
Mhm.
Which I think you asked him that question at the press. Was that you who asked him?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
I asked them what it was like to, be sort of reunited after, the Giants of Africa experience together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's the quote he gave.
That's one of the three press conferences where you didn't ask a soccer question. Although we did in the scrum afterwards. Remember the informal scrum? that Masai
Yes.
was holding. Because remember, there was that talk of like, oh, because he was like courted by lots of people, not just in basketball, like in other sports as well.
Hmm.
And the rumor was that like an EPL team had contacted him, and you and
Right.
I, being just absolute nerds, were being like, oh my god, who was it? Like the PSG
Yeah.
call for Masai or something like that. But anyway, we didn't actually get the answer there, unfortunately, of which Premier League team called them. I guess PSG
That
is
was
not Premier.
actually that
But
private conversation we had with him was the original. Oh, if I could have traded or signed Messi in free agency, I would have. Yeah,
yeah, that's
we
funny.
dream. Yeah, we dream like they dream.
Yeah, no, that's okay. The Lakers, they got Darvin Ham. Yeah, it's all good, man. They're gonna enjoy Darvin. We're gonna keep Nick Nurse, and then yeah, in terms of to wrap up this sort of idea, like the last category I have is like movable contracts, like essentially
Yep.
like filler pieces that you can sort of move in. Probably doesn't have too much like inherent value just on their own.
Yeah.
And I think in this category, you got to put Ken Birch in here. I know he had a down season, but his contract is very low. He's a
Hmm.
dependable player. Honestly, when he's healthy, very smart player, very unselfish player, still in his 20s as well. We got to see obviously what he looks like after arthroscopic knee surgery, but it's not a contract where teams are going to be like really pressed about holding on to. Again, we're talking about $6 million a year. That's very low in the modern NBA. I think when Thad, if and when Thad and Chris Boucher get re-signed, I think they fit into this category as well.
Yeah.
And then everyone else, essentially, I mean, no one's going to trade for them because their contracts are too low or they don't have long-term contracts. So that kind of covers off the team as we speak. But I think part of the reason why I wanted to do this exercise too is just sort of like look at like where the Raptors are in terms of like the pieces they have and the potential they have to sort of build themselves into a championship organization. We know they
Hmm.
already did it once, and they're trying to go back and climb back on top of the hill again. I think they actually have a pretty good selection of players and pieces that you feel very comfortable keeping them and growing with them. And at the same time, if you do move them, I think they have very good value. Like I don't think there's even one bad contract on the Raptors, which is actually very, very nice to see. And I kind of want
Hmm.
to sort of contrast that with sort of like the way that Boston and Golden State built their rosters, right? Because obviously the two of them are going to meet in the finals. It's going to start tomorrow. Finally, we're actually get some basketball again. I've been missing watching basketball. This break between the
Yeah.
conference finals and the actual finals has been very long. But anyway, so I kind of wanted to look at
Before,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
before we get to the Warriors Celtics points that we're about to make, there's a quick thing that I just wanted to throw in about trade scenarios for the Raptors
Sure.
and just make the point that, when you look at the Raptors front office history of making deals, they usually do it when they've pretty much reached peak value of a player.
Mm,
So you think about
right.
DeMar DeRozan, you think about Terrence Ross,
Norm
you
Powell.
think about even Norman Powell,
Yeah.
right? They were able to extract pretty much max value for those guys. And so when you look at the players on the roster right now, the only one who's probably close to that, or the only two, are probably Fred and Pascal, and they're probably not getting dealt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, it's fun for people to talk about. I know it's like the number one thing people always want to do is like play with the trade machine, but yeah, it's I if my it's going to be a very boring offseason for the Raptors. I'm just going to say that. It's going to be very low key is my prediction. Maybe it's not. And if it honestly for content purposes, it's probably better if it's not, but most likely it'll be a very chill offseason for the Raptors. Okay, so
Hey, as long as we get videos of Scotty shooting jumpers, we're good.
yeah, that's right. Scotty hitting three straight 3-pointers, uncontested, unguarded, foot on the line, and I'm like, people are going crazy over it. I love the offseason. It's not like he hasn't done that, I don't know, like every single day of his life for the last probably 10 years. But anyway, let's just move on. So I want to look at the way the two teams in the finals were built, starting with
Hmm.
Boston. And what was really striking to me, actually, thinking about Boston's team, is that there's not a single player in their rotation right now that they acquired via free agency. Like this team is
Right.
entirely built through the draft and through two shrewd trades, which were really only conducted this season with Al Horford returning in the Kemba Walker salary dump, essentially. They gave up a first round pick to do that. Horford has obviously played a huge role in the Celtics run. And then they were able to acquire Derek White at the trade deadline. They traded Josh Richardson plus a first plus a future swap. Everyone else on the team, though, was just drafted. which I think to me is like
Hmm.
probably the most impressive part of Boston's build. And yeah, Vivek, like what are some of the lessons you take away from watching the Celtics in terms of like how they built the roster?
I think the biggest thing is patience,
Mm,
because when you look at Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, when you fail, you're more likely people from the outside are more likely to keep pointing out the things that you can't do, right? And it was always, oh, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown don't work together. Marcus Smart can't play the point guard position, can't be a playmaker. Um, but they have just stuck with those guys
mhm,
and continue to believe in them. Uh, and to parallel that, I think of the Warriors. When they were building with the Splash Brothers, yeah, they took that knock initially against the Clippers, and that was there was a conversation at the time was like, "Hey, does something need to change here?"
mhm.
Um, there were rumors of that Kevin Love trade, right?
Yep.
For Clay Thompson, and so I think they stuck with it, and they just got a little piece to help them in Andre Iguodala, and that's all they did.
Mhm.
Same thing with the Celtics, like, they've just tweaked around the edges and kept it together. It's funny, I kinda when I look at Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and the way they've kept at it, can't help but think, maybe they are the modern day version of kinda like what woulda happened if Vince and T-Mac woulda stayed
Ah,
together.
damn, damn. I can't. Yeah, I mean, they're not.
Not comparing, what their style of play,
Sure, man.
but you talk about, 2 guys who kinda came in on rookie contracts to a team
Mhm, yeah,
and are athletic wings and could be special together, that's what they are.
yeah. No, that's true. And I think you make a great point. Like the base of both teams is built through the draft. Like this is a like again, I'm not trying to like prescribe judgment to or morality to how you build a team. Like, who cares? Just put your team together and just move on, right? Um, but like, this is two very organically grown teams. We're looking at the free range finals, essentially. Okay, well, on Boston's side, you got Jalen Brown, number 3 overall pick, 2016. You got Jason Tatum, number 3 overall pick, 2017. Marcus Smart, 6 overall pick, 2014. Grant Williams, 22nd overall, 2019. Robert Williams, 27 overall in 2018, and even Peyton Pritchard, 26 overall, 2020 draft. It's like that is the core of their team. They drafted these guys. They made a few trades, and obviously we'll get into that in a second. But that is Boston's core. And you look at Golden State's core: Steph Curry, number 7 overall, 2009; Klay Thompson, 11th overall, 2011; Draymond, 36 overall, 2012. That's probably the best draft pick in both these teams, by the way. Like that's
Mm,
inspired drafting by the Warriors there. Jordan Poole, 28th overall in 2019, and then Kevon Looney, 30th overall, 2015. Jonathan Kuminga, 7th overall this past year's draft, and then Moody at 14. Like we're looking at two teams that are essentially just, if you really nail the draft, you can build, and you show some patience, as you mentioned, you can build a contender. And then the other thing too is just, as you mentioned, like the trades that you make and then the trades that you don't make. Because on Boston's side, you obviously got the KG and Paul Pierce trade, which when you think
yep.
about it at that time, very much like what we were just speaking about with the Raptors, is just like you have to extract maximum value from them as players. And then at the end of it, you have to make a very hard choice in terms of when to sort of give it up. And obviously at
Mhm.
that time, Brooklyn, as they always are, were very thirsty to build a super team and failed. I feel like that's in my lifetime as a Raptor, as a basketball fan of like 20 years. I think that's already happened like 3 or 4 times with Brooklyn, like, or I guess even New Jersey
Yeah.
back then. Um, but yeah, you even look back at that trade, like they got the 2014 pick, 2016 pick, 2017 pick swap, and 2018 first round picks, all from Brooklyn, just to get rid of KG and Paul Pierce at the end of their careers, and that set them up for this next decade of being great, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. And then on the
The
Warriors
the
side, it's like they it's not even about the trades that you make, it's also the trades you turn down, right? Because they had a chance to
Yes.
flip Steph for Amari on draft night. And Amari was amazing in 2009. Like that, no one would have blamed them if they took Amari Stoudemire. but they kept it. They took Steph. And then obviously later on, as you mentioned, not moving Clay for Kevin Love in 2014, which was also at the time was like, why would you not trade for Kevin Love?
And
But
now when I remember back and sort of rekindle my memory,
mhm,
it was Jerry West who was kind of adamant about that.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And he was sort of like, I'm gone if you guys do this. And so shout out Jerry West.
Yeah. And then he was gone anyway.
Yeah. He's like, my work here is done.
I mean, bro, his work was definitely done when you think about it. No, but like, I just I respect a lot about what these two organizations have done, you know, and I think the other piece of it too is just like finding the right coach. And for the Warriors, they found the right coach very early on. Steve Kerr, first year he's brought on, he wins the championship. And now you look at Boston, they hire Ime Udoka, who, by the way, I think the Raptors were also in on Ime back when they let go of Dwayne Casey. I think he was one of the finalists. Obviously, Nick ended
Yep.
up getting the job, but Ime was very much top of mind for Masai and company. And yeah, you find the right coach, you draft the right players, you make shrewd moves, and you know it's fun. It's kind of enjoyable to me that we're not seeing like a super team kind of free agency kind of monstrosity that are taking place in this year's finals. Like these are just two teams who are really well run, made the right picks, and now they're getting to play on the big stage. You got a prediction for the finals?
I think this is going to be a great series. I think we're going to finish off strong
Hmm.
after the disappointing conference finals. But yeah, I'm leaning Warriors in 7
Yeah.
right
Okay.
now. How about you?
Yeah. Likewise. I know Alex is more of a Celtic hater than the two of us. We're trying to hide it right now, but we are also Celtic haters. And yeah, he picked Warriors in 5. That's optimistic, but
Wow.
then at the same time, you know, you never know, man. If the Warriors give you one of those vintage performances, it's possible. That's the thing when you're dealing with like a dynasty like that. Like they just have that kind of level. But Vivek, thank you for joining us as always on Wednesday. Look forward to calling you again next week. Um, and yeah, man, take care.
Thanks, Will. As always, take care.
All right, I think that's a good spot for us to take a break. I'm your host, Wim Lu, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. When we come back, we will dive much more in depth into the finals matchup between the Warriors and the Celtics. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. I'm your host, Wim Liu. And for the second segment, to preview everything upcoming with the NBA Finals, I am joined by Mo Dakhil, founder of thejumpball.net, at Bleacher Report as well, podcasts with the Athletic NBA, and also former NBA video coordinator with the Clippers, with the San Antonio Spurs, with the Australian men's basketball team, and also just like a really good dude who is a great follow on Twitter as well. Mo, how you doing?
I did a lot. That's a lot to run down. I might need to cut down here a little bit.
Yeah, you have. You got a lot of stripes in this game. No, it's great. Honestly, like it's great. I'm seeing what you're doing. What are you doing like post games now? You're on Twitch as well.
I do Twitch streams from time to time. Probably not as often as I would like. I'm also traveling right now, so it's going to make the Twitch streams kind of weird because I'm
Okay.
dependent on internet connections elsewhere. But ultimately, I try to break down the game as much as I can to make the fans smarter. That's really what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. No, I definitely feel a lot smarter watching, just all the clips that you put online. You know, you're also doing another thing, one Mo thing,
Yeah.
which I just watched your video on Steph Curry. So I remember I was like, wow, Steph Curry blocked a corner three. Like that's rare.
We
But
can't
then
forget that. It's not going to happen again. I'd be
You-
shocked.
yeah, I was gonna say because I think I've probably watched I don't know like 500 Steph games, and I don't think I've seen him block a three before. But then as you highlight on that play in the one Mo thing that you did, he made like 4 different rotations to get there in that play, and it's just like wow, Steph's a lot better on defense than I think we give him credit for right now, at least.
No, I mean, I think, the reputation he earned at the start of his career was fair. And I think, we don't tend to allow that to change very often, narratively wise. And I think, you're right. He's gotten so much better defensively. Now, I'm not going to say he's a lockdown defender or anything,
Mhm,
but
mhm,
he's always in the right spots. Like he's making plays and competing. It's something that I wish a guy like Trey Young would pay attention to. He's
mm.
not as tall as Curry, but I'd like him to try. And I think sometimes that's just a big value of that. And then from there, he's just gotten a lot better with his awareness and things. And I think that clip really illustrates it for Curry.
Yeah, he looks physically stronger as well. I don't know how much that necessarily impacted it as well, but it does seem like he is more often like neutral and a slight plus defensively in a lot of these matchups that we have seen, and that's kind of where I wanted to start with. So when you're looking at the finals, the defensive matchups for both teams, who's going to be guarding who? I think that's probably going to be the most important thing. So Mo, I'd love to ask, what are the defensive matchups going both ways here?
Yeah, so I think starting for the Celtics, I think they're going to start with Marcus Smart on Curry. He's done a great job over the years guarding Curry. It seems to be a pretty favorable matchup for him. I think you're going to start out with I'm going to assume Robert Williams is going to be playing
Sure.
and healthy. So that might change depending on how things go. We're going to have media day here in just a little bit. Um, I'm going to assume you're going to have Horford on Draymond and you're going to put Williams on Looney and allow Williams to roam defensively. And then from there, I think Tatum's going to be on Wiggins, and you're going to put Jalen Brown on Klay Thompson. Now, ultimately, here's the thing: they're going to switch a lot. So
Yeah.
the way the possession is going to start, it's going to be one thing, and how it ends will be wildly different with who's on who. And I think that's going to be the main thing. On the flip side, I think you're going to start out with um, Curry's still going to match up with Smart. I think they're going to put Jalen Brown on Wiggins, or excuse me, on Jason Tatum. Sorry, that's confusing. This
Oh,
is
hold on.
so too much basketball at once. Jason Tatum on Klay Thompson, Tatum on Wiggins. I think the matchups will generally be the same. I think Draymond's going to start out on Horford and Kevon Looney with Williams. I think that's going to largely be the same matchup. And,
Mm.
For them, the key is going to just being like staying out of switches because you don't want Curry switching on any of the big wings.
Right, right. And I think that's probably where if you think about the way the Celtics will probably try to attack, I think the Celtics probably play more mismatch basketball than the Warriors do necessarily. Um so yeah. I mean, I think we saw a variety of that in the last series with Dallas where Luca was definitely trying to look for Steph all the time, and they did a whole bunch of stuff the Warriors did defensively to try to avoid that. It's a lot of stuff like hedging and trying to get back onto his man or They were playing some more zone as well to sort of try to prevent that sort of one-on-one sort of hunting. Um, do you think that that experience with Dallas, having just played Luca, helps the Warriors in that regard in terms of like being able to hide stuff a little bit more effectively to keep them out of these bad one-on-one matchups?
Yeah, I think that's been a big part of it. I think this is something they've had to deal with for years. I mean, just think about all the times when they've matched up against the Rockets with James Harden. I mean,
Mm,
that was the same thing. It's almost a common occurrence. And at this point, they probably have more practice than any team in the NBA trying to hide their with
yeah,
their
fair.
guys showing hard and trying to recover. I mean, that's part of Curry's gotten good at it because he's had multiple reps in a way that nobody else has had. And I think that's important to kind of figure. I think the other thing that's going to get interesting and maybe challenging for the Warriors is when they have Poole and Curry on the court at the same time.
Right,
Because now
right.
you're putting two targets out there. We might see some zone in that. We might see some of that kind of come out there a little bit. But I think that's going to be really interesting. I think you're right, and the Celtics are going to try to play some matchup ball and look for opportunities for Marcus Smart to slip if Curry hedges, because then it turns into Marcus Smart attacking on a 4-on-3, and then that will
Mm,
get interesting.
interesting. So Smart could do a little Draymond in this series.
It exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think to the point about the Warriors defense, I mean, look, they've always been a really good defensive team. I know obviously the credit that they get and the reputation is always like, they revolutionized the game with how much 3-point shooting, with their movement, all that stuff. And obviously Steph and Clay being just incredible shooters, all-time shooters. But I think what's lost is like they're consistently like a top 5 defensive team as well. And I think this year though, it's interesting because you look at it, maybe to me at least the impression is I look at like the individual personnel and it doesn't feel like they should be that good defensively, which kind of leads me to two things. Like one, I mean Draymond probably just needs to get even more love defensively for the things he does with this team, but also be like Steve Kerr has gotten really, really creative with his defense. Even in the past when they did a lot of like switching and they had Andre Iguodala and they had Kevin Durant and they had Sean Livingston and it was like, oh my God, there's just wings everywhere. And they switched everything. They were probably more like Boston at that time. But this version of the Warriors defense, like, I mean, this being a Raptors show, did Steve Kerr lift a lot of ideas from Nick Nurse defensively?
Yeah, I think that's actually a big part of it. I mean, just think about, he got to look at the box and one up close and personal during those finals, and then from there we've seen him use it. He used it against Luka Doncic, and I think you're going to see a lot of that stuff. I think he started to get more creative defensively with that happening. And I think here's the thing, and this is a secret that coaches don't want other people to know. So I'm going to whisper it very quietly, but coaches steal from other coaches all the time. Nobody comes up with original stuff. It's all taken from somebody else. Coaching is thievery at its best.
Uh-huh.
You see somebody else run a play, it works. You're like, hey, we could run the same play. And I think, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think, yeah, a big part of that 2019 finals kind of changed Curry's perspective a little bit defensively.
Yeah, it is kind of funny because I remember even, I think it was game 2, the Raptors finally pulled out the box and won. And one comment that I got, I think, got a lot of Raptor fans, irate. Good, look, we're a very sensitive fan
You're
base.
always irate. I love you guys.
We're,
You're
we're
always irate. I tweet the wrong thing, and that's my mentions for the rest of the week.
I'm sorry, Mo. I'm sorry, man. Listen, it is what it is. We're the perpetual underdogs. It's a little annoying. I get it. But yeah, I mean, it was like Steph was saying, like, like it's a bit of a janky defense, and people were like, "Wow, how dare you call it janky?" All that stuff, and it's like now the Warriors do that stuff. Like the Warriors throw out tons of like junk defensive schemes all the time, and it's actually really fun to watch. It's really impressive to watch. Actually, I think it's like, I mean, even just thinking about like the defenses that work nowadays in the NBA, like I think players are so skilled across the board and so much 3-point shooting and so much speed and versatility. It's like, don't you feel like unless you have like that Boston style of defense where you can just switch everything and you can kind of neutralize almost any sort of advantages that teams try to come up against, like, don't you have to be that creative? Like when I look at coaches around the league and they don't have 4 or 5 defensive schemes that they can sort of shuffle through on a game-to-game basis or even within games, like I almost see that as a disadvantage for most coaches. Like if you're just coming in and playing drop defense and sort of trying to, Tom Thibodeau your way through it a little bit, it feels almost outdated.
Yeah, I think coaches have to get more revolutionary in terms of how they approach things. And I think, zone defense is a good way to just mix up coverages and forget about just hiding a guy. Just throw an offense out of rhythm for 2 or 3 possessions. One thing I'd like to see more of is actually I'd like to see more teams selectively press full court and
Mm,
pressure and put on something there, because I think offenses take for granted that, hey, like, we can just walk the ball up the court. It's an 8-second count waiting there. And I think I think that's something teams need to get to. But I think the game's revolutionized in a way where you have to be creative defensively. I think the way offenses have evolved, defense has to make the next evolution in terms of it. And the old school principles, like, I'm a old school guy. If you don't help off the strong side corner, and now as I'm watching, I'm like, well, there might be instances where you're going to need to. And you have to kind of figure that stuff out, because offenses have learned to take advantage of defenses. So now defenses need to change.
yeah, absolutely. But I think it makes it interesting. It's like, to me, I watch coaches now, and it's almost like a pitcher essentially, or like a catcher, throwing down the signs with a good pitcher that can throw like 4 or 5 pitches to get outs. Like that's kind of what it feels like on a game-to-game possession. Or maybe I'm just watching the Raptors a little bit too much, but I am really enjoying that sort of like tactical side of it. I think going back to the finals matchup here, the two starting fives, I think defensively match up well against each other. I think offensively, both teams are going to struggle a little bit to sort of find advantages. If you're looking at the Warriors' perspective in terms of how you want to attack this Boston defense, because that's what makes the Celtics so great, is that they're so good defensively. Like, uh, where do they attack?
I think it's let's make Boston play fewer possessions in the half court defensively,
Okay.
and that's by pace and pushing the ball, run off makes, run every opportunity they get. They need to push the ball. They're going to have a lot of turnovers. This is who the Golden State Warriors are, but they need to be playing. I kind of joked and call it Top Gun style, just fast and reckless. Let's go,
Mm.
and fly up the court. Need to get opportunities. Need to pick up the pace and make the defense, have to chase them in that opportunity. And if they can keep the pace up and keep that going, that'll be fewer possessions Boston has to play where they get to, excuse me, fewer possessions where the Warriors have to play against a Boston set defense. And that's critical right there. And I think that's going to be one of the main things I'm going to watch for, is really the battle of pace. If the Warriors can get this game into the 110s, the 115s, that plays right in their hands. If Boston can get this into the low 100s, that's going to work perfectly for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's been interesting watching the Warriors like throughout this playoff run, because they're winning in ways that at least I don't remember them doing the same things in previous playoff runs. Like, for example, they just dominated the Mavericks on the offensive glass. And
Yeah,
I'm curious to hear from you. Like, what made the Warriors so good in the offensive glass? Because this team never really struck me as like a wow, you got to really keep them off the boards. But they're clearly doing something that makes them quite effective.
yeah, I think the uh, ultimate thing is, one, against Dallas, they had the size advantage because they were playing small, but they constantly are crashing, and they understand that, hey, we need to rebound as a team defensively. So that's all 5 guys. The phrase constantly used is gang rebound, right? All
Hmm.
5 guys jumping in. Offensively, they're getting crashes from the corners from guys like Andrew Wiggins, who's really stepped up in the playoffs, and really in his run as a Warrior. Like, this has been a great run for him. Crashing from the corner for offensive rebounds, it's very hard for defenses to box that guy out. So that's really the opportunities that they're going to find in terms of rebounding. But other things that they're doing is teams are more focused on taking the three away from them, and they're content with that. Cool, we'll just beat you with twos. We're going to get into the lane consistently and easily over and over again, and that's exactly what they did through the entire run of the playoffs so far.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that corner crash is really interesting, because I think in a lot of other, I think probably in previous seasons, it felt like that was much more rare. Like, the priority was usually to get back on defense, especially if you're like the corner shooter and the shot goes up. You probably have to make the longest. You would definitely have to make the longest run back defensively. So
Yeah,
I think there was definitely more of a priority put on transition defense. I think even maybe across league wide, but even when I watched the Raptors season, like the Raptors were second in the regular season in offensive rebounding, right behind Memphis, and like that's one of the things the Raptors always did. They would always crash from the corners, always, and they usually crash with like Precious or Chris Boucher coming from the corners. That's it's a very athletic guy coming in the corner without anyone boxing him out, and that's one of the reasons why the Raptors were able to find that inefficiency and getting those extra possessions.
and it's funny, going back to stealing stuff. This is something that the Milwaukee Bucks made a ton of money off of in the playoffs last year with PJ Tucker crashing from the corner
Right,
consistently,
right.
right? He's a corner 3-point shooter, and it really kind of just, he would just crash every time, and that created another offensive possessions for the Bucks then. And I think a lot of teams caught on to that, and we're seeing a massive influx of that throughout the entire season. You said the Raptors. It's something we've seen from Memphis.
Mhm.
Something we're seeing from the Warriors and Wiggins. We've seen it from a lot of teams. It's not just those few teams doing it. A lot of teams saw it and now are doing it this season. And yeah, they've put more emphasis on crashing the offensive glass.
Yeah, it's really smart. It's really smart. But of course, if you do commit a lot to the offensive glass, there is still the risk that you have numbers out in transition. I think this is a team where this is a series where both teams are just so lethal in transition. Obviously, the Celtics obviously have lots of great athletes out in the run, and the Warriors are just like, I mean, they don't even run to the rim sometimes. They'll just run out to the 3-point line, and it's even harder to guard those, I think, in transition. I think, in terms of looking at the benches, that's to me where some of the separation might come offensively, at least, is the fact that the Warriors can bring someone like Jordan Poole into the game, and he is very, very dynamic as a scorer. Whereas I look at the bench for Boston, and it doesn't really feel like they have like a guy that you can rely on all the time for scoring. I guess you could say Peyton Pritchard, but he's very rarely a factor in many of these games. So, do you see that as a distinct advantage for the Warriors?
Yes and no, because I think what it does is, as good as he is on offense, he's also a liability on defense.
Mm,
And I think that becomes an issue. They got to be able to get 20 to 25 minutes from Poole. Like, I don't think we're going to see that really small Poole, Curry, Thompson lineup as often as people think. Is just because, again, the size disadvantage and things like that for what it does for the Warriors and what it allows the Celtics to be able to do to them on the offensive end. I feel like it's going to open up opportunities. I think Poole's going to be really important, and he's got to be able to stay on the court defensively and knock down shots. Now, if he's not knocking down shots, I don't see him playing a lot of minutes because he's going to be hurting defensively. But I think if he can hit shots, they're going to be able to do that. And you're right. The Celtics don't have a dude that you can consistently count on. Yeah, Peyton Pritchard can get hot. There's no question. Derek White is the guy they're going to bring off the bench, though, mostly, and he's going to play mainly defense. And I think the Warriors are going to leave him open for the most part.
mhm.
But they don't have a guy that can just give you 25 off the bench the way Poole can. So they have the advantage there, but it's going to open up other opportunities for the Celtics to take advantage of.
That's true. It actually reminds me a little bit of like what they just went through in the Heat series with Tyler Hero, right? And of course, Hero obviously, he suffered some injuries and he wasn't able to play a couple of these games, and even the game, game 7 when he did try to play in the first half, I mean, like he clearly didn't have it either. So, but it's similar because even when Hero was healthy in that series, like, I mean, he wasn't able to score, and it was like they're taking advantage of him on the other end as well. So, yeah, this is gonna be a really interesting series. Mo, like, do you have a series prediction?
I have one, and I'm not too confident in it, but I
Okay,
have the Warriors in 7.
okay,
I could see this going either way. Like, to me, it's kind of a toss-up series because it's going to just be dependent on how each team sort of handles the other team's game plan and how they kind of approach things. I Before this week, or actually before Game 6, I probably had the Celtics winning in 7, but just the way they played down the stretch, I got scared, so I ended up going with the Warriors.
yeah. You know what? Actually, that's an interesting thing too. It's just like what is it about Boston where like it feels like things can be really cruising for them, and then like there's no reason why they even needed a game 7
I mean, it's not
dispatch of the
it's
Heat. Like,
it's not even that. It's just like, the last 3 minutes you were up by 13. How did it come down to a Jimmy Butler
yeah,
3? Like, what, their offense completely fell apart, and it's something that I've touched on before in the past with Boston, and that's what scares me about this team. I can't trust them in the final 3 minutes, and the Warriors are too experienced.
yeah, I agree with you. I think that's why I also have Warriors in 7. But listen, Boston has a very good chance at this. Like when you're looking at like they're a bigger team, they're I mean, honestly, their one-on-one scores are. I mean, Steph is also an incredible one-on-one scorer. They just very rarely does one-on-one stuff, but it's gonna be a really interesting series, and I can't wait to start watching it. But Mo, thank you for joining us on the show. Yeah, just put. You know what? Honestly, I already plugged it out top, but how about you plug what you're doing these days? Because you're doing a lot, and it's always very high quality stuff.
I'm doing a ton of stuff, folks. Please, just the easiest thing to do is follow me on Twitter, MODAKHIL_NBA. I tweet out all my stuff all the time, so you'll see where my work is. You'll see when I'm going live on Twitch. You're going to see when I'm doing obviously a one mo thing or a post game show for somebody else or anything like that. Easiest thing, just follow me on Twitter.
All right, Mo, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll speak soon.
And thank you for having me.
All right. That does it for today's episode of the Raptors Show. I actually wanted to pass along a few notes. So first off, Thursday, for people listening, the show will be off. The Blue Jays are playing a day game against the Chicago White Sox. And so there will be no Raptors Show on Thursday. I'll be returning Friday with Alex Wong. I know it's a rare gift these days for the podcast co-host to actually, come to the studio and work. But Alex will be here on Thursday or on Friday, and we will cover more of the NBA Finals. We'll do, usual Alex stuff. I'll probably try to talk basketball, and he'll probably try to convince me to not talk about basketball, and that's usually how this show goes. Otherwise, that does it for us today. I'm your host, William Liu, and you've been listening to The Raptors Show on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel, airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday between 2 and 3 p.m. So catch us there. Also, make sure you stay tuned for Jays Talk Plus with Blake Murphy. I already see Blake Murphy waiting in the back there, ready to give you 2 hours of nerdy baseball talk. So definitely catch that live on air or in the podcast stream. Thanks to my guests, Vivek Jacob and Mo Dakhil, our board producer, Lance Kennedy, filling in for Derek Brandale today, and Jennifer Rolnick for helping us with the YouTube stream. I will talk to you Friday.